Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pathways to Family Wellness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brendan Reardon, pediatric and family chiropractor. Joining me today, we've got a special guest. We have Dr. Jen Santos, DACCP, who has achieved the highest level of certification from the ICPA. That's the Diplomate in Chiropractic Pediatrics. She is a second-generation chiropractor. She received her first adjustment at 45 minutes old by her dad. Dr. Jen graduated from Life Chiropractic College West in 2013 with honors and received the prestigious Clinical Excellence Award. Jen, thanks so much for joining us. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. There's a class that you teach for the ICPA, which is a really neat one. I actually just went through it called Navigating the Highs and Lows of Family Practice.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be really appropriate for some of our talk today, not about practice, but for our listeners to talk about just navigating some of the highs and lows of parenting. I think if you look out and you look at the social media world, which is never the real world, but it's really easy to see how people are navigating the highs of parenting. And I think sometimes we don't want to play in the mud as much and talk about navigating some of the lows of parenting and what that's like. But before we jump into some of that, I'm just curious for our listeners, if you're able to let us know about, your family, the ages of your children, and if you have any like core family values that tend to really drive the way that you look at things.
Yeah, totally. So we currently, as of right now, have a 13-year-old boy named Noah. We have a 6-year-old named Koa. And then we have a baby on the way. So I'm about 20 and a half weeks pregnant.
Awesome. What a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be neat. And the family's going to grow. And there's so our family's a little more spread out as well. There's about an 8.5-year gap from my oldest to my youngest. We've got 3 kids also, the youngest being 18 months now. And I found that gap. It's interesting when we have folks in the practice, they'll always, the conversation always comes up for people with multiple kids about the age spread. How do you time it? What's the best way to go about that? Do you have an answer for that question? I always just I'm not sure that there is a best way, really, but.
Well, so 2 of my children have been our biggest surprises. My first being when Noah came about, we were actively trying not to get pregnant because we were about to start chiropractic college together.
Yeah.
So my husband and I went to chiropractic college together. We had been married about 5 years. In March, we will have been married 19 years.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. That's what happens when you get married when you're like 5. No, we got married very young and we've known each other our whole lives. But I was 19 when we got married, and we were married for 5 years, and both had different careers, and we fell in love with chiropractic differently than we had loved chiropractic, because I'm a second-generation chiropractor. Yeah. I never wanted to be a chiropractor. I never wanted to own a business of chiropractic because I saw how hard it was. And so when we decided finally to go to chiropractic college, we were like, okay, we have to get serious about like not having a baby. And about 2 months before we started chiropractic college, I found out I was pregnant. So we postponed chiropractic college just a little bit, started chiropractic college when he was about 2 months old, and went through the program with him. So his entire, his nursery rhymes, his lullabies were the TCA cycle and Guyton's physiology and all of that kind of stuff, because we had no choice.
Yes.
And so so we went through his little life with us, and once we had been in practice I think like 2.5 years, we decided, we're a little established, we should probably, like, if we're gonna have another kid, we should probably have another kid. And so we sort of planned Koa, and then went through that pregnancy. It was great, fine, everything was wonderful. He was born, and then we were like, okay, well, we'll have a 3rd kid soon. And then it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. And then about last year, I decided, we're kind of done. We don't need, like, now our kids would all be 7 years apart when they're born. And I was like, I'm really happy with our family and our careers, and like, let's just call it good. And then over the summer, I found out I was pregnant. I was like,
Yeah.
great. So this was a big surprise. I travel a lot for teaching, for chiropractic. And so I had to kind of call and rework my 2024 schedule and all of
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. So it was a big surprise, but we're excited. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, the kids must be so excited as well that there's going to be another member of the family.
They're so excited. They've affectionately named the baby Boa, for,
Everyone-
for baby Oa,
yeah.
because in my postpartum stupor, I named my children rhyming names because we have Noah
Yes.
and Koa. Did not realize that they were rhyming until the next day. My friend was like, "That's so cute, they rhyme," and I was like, "Oh, I didn't
Oh,
realize that."
oh, yeah, yeah,
Oops.
like, oh, yes.
So now the boys are totally convinced we have to have an Oa baby. So most likely
Yeah.
not, but for now it's baby
Yeah.
Oa.
Yeah. 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 No, that's fun. And, especially with those ages, they can have a little more responsibilities. It's interesting,
Yeah.
with the parents that have them all boom, 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 like there's a family we take care of, or she had three before three, and it's like
Yeah.
you're in it. And
Yeah.
then you're kind of out. I mean, you're always in it, but then you're out of it a little bit sooner. It's all a little bit different. We found
Yeah.
for ours, like when my oldest was 8.5, when our third was born, we tried to get him to change diapers. He expressed very clearly that he had no interest in that whatsoever.
Not gonna
But he
happen.
helps out in so many other ways. Like he can hold the baby. He
Yeah.
can safely play with the baby if we need to prepare a meal or do something else like that.
Yeah.
So now that we've got a crazy toddler, it's just all bets are off for everything. I think we swore off
Yep.
restaurants recently as well. Just,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is interesting having the age spread like that, because you're navigating a bunch of different social dynamics with the children as well. Someone
Yeah.
at 13 is into different things than the 7-year-old will be into. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So to go back to core family values, two that we really live by, Jeannie Ohm was a big mentor of mine. And in her seminars, she would always share a quote by Albert Einstein of the most important decision we make is whether we believe we live in a friendly or hostile universe.
yeah,
And that's really one of our like driving quotes in our family is like, when we look at the universe, we want to believe that we live in a friendly universe. And my prior life before chiropractic, I was in law enforcement. And so I definitely know that there's hostility that exists in the world.
yeah,
But that goes back to like, if you're around me for any length of time, you'll hear me talk about like how we need to be human and we need to connect with people. And even people on their worst days, in the law enforcement field, people want to connect. People want to be
yeah,
seen and understood and looking for that connection, whether it's legally or illegally. And so that to me has been two of our like driving core values as family is like, we want to believe that we live in a friendly universe. And so when we walk by people, if we're like on a hike, and I'm telling my kids like, hey, get out of the way. Instead of saying that, I'll be like, hey, watch out for our friends, and I'll
yeah,
just always kind of introduce strangers as like our friends.
yeah,
And I think that that's one of the ways that my kids have been really adapted. Like they know that there's danger for people and they're not going to like go off and take a puppy or candy from strangers and stuff like that.
yeah,
But they also don't look at everyone as like a potential like hostile person.
yeah,
And so really trying to find that familiarity and connection with people, and coming from the idea that people aren't out to get you, like they're just they're doing it for them, not to you. And I think that that's
yeah.
also something that's really, really important.
That is really neat. And I think that psychology is going to help them to feel like they're more in the driver's seat of their life a lot more as they go on. It is an interesting thing, the idea about like, watch out for strangers. It's almost like we instill in people that like everyone's a threat, and it almost creates this like defense physiology,
Totally.
where you're gonna misinterpret social situations if you're going into it thinking that everyone's a threat. And like,
Right.
to your point, that's not to say that you live sloppy or off guard or anything like that. Yeah, there's real stuff that does happen, and
Right.
bad things do happen to good people sometimes, but
Yeah.
I think your underlying philosophy of that, like, if we live in a friendly universe, strangers by and large, I have found, are there to help. Like, it's if you look at a situation where, let's say someone's car broke down by the side of the road. At first, you might see a whole bunch of people driving by, but then all it takes is one person to get out for other people. And then before you know it, you're going to see a lot of other people helping out, realizing like, oh, this isn't just inconvenient in my life. Like that if someone needs help, usually people are there to help. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really neat value to like instill in the kids about this. Let's instead of out of the way, let's make space for our friends.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
Everybody's my friend. Yeah, this is
Yep.
But I think there's, and this goes back to some of the chiropractic philosophy, which one of the biggest pieces I've taken away is this idea of trust, like trusting in the human body and trusting in the universe to a certain extent, right? And the idea that like the universe isn't out to get you, your body hasn't betrayed you, like, even though sometimes it feels that way sometimes, like there's an order to things, there's an intelligence to things. And those kind of values I think are so important to instill in our children from a young age.
Yeah.
Something else you said about connection as well, right? I just wonder how much of the antisocial behavior we see as adults, that becomes on a large scale, started with a child that never got connected with properly, right? And like, and it starts as smaller problems as a child, which becomes bigger problems as they become bigger humans, still struggling to find connection. Yeah.
Totally.
Now, for your children, are there certain things that really seem to like light them up, or that they get super excited about? What's like the
so they're both really into science. They're both really into like physics and how things work. Neither one of them want anything to do with like body stuff, which is really funny because both my husband and I are chiropractors. And so neither one of them want to know anything about the body. They don't want biology is like, no. But they both are really intrigued by like the physics and how things work. And my mom helps us homeschool them, and she was talking to my older son on Monday, and she was talking about how the sky is blue, and it's because it reflects from the ocean, and that's what makes it appear blue. And my 13-year-old was like, Gima, that's what they call her, I don't think that's really true. I think it's actually from a process of like refraction, where like the particles that are like that hit the like from the sun that hit the ozone layer like scatter, and the only visible color is blue, and so that's why it's blue. And she was like, yeah, and the ocean.
Yes, and the ocean. Yeah.
And I was like, I think Noah's actually right. And I don't know what he said, but all of those words, I think he's actually right.
Yeah.
So it's really funny. And then like my little son is really into like geography, and they were talking about continents, and my mom was saying something like, my mom is very, very smart. So I'm just giving two examples of senior moments. She was talking about continents, and the continent of South America. And my son was like, well, yeah, but I mean, South America has a lot of different countries. And she's like, well, no, that's the country is like the continent. And my son was like, no. And he's like 6 years old, telling her like, no, there's like Brazil and Peru. And then he said Portugal, and his father is Portuguese. So I was like, oh no, not Portugal. I'm like, that's in Europe, buddy. And so like we had to show him the map and stuff like that. But it was pretty funny. Like, so both my kids are very like science oriented, but neither one of them have any desire to learn anything about the body.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
So not even the science of the body, right? It's more of like it's more of like abstract scientific concepts, like it's like that. Yeah. That's really interesting. Now, what are some ways, or some, you had mentioned the parenting philosophy, and I'm sure that flows into all things, but you're able to navigate some like the highs and lows of parenting. But I guess the high moments are easy to navigate. So like we can speak on those, but it's not really, those don't really require navigation, right? That's like, you're in the high moments. You're like, oh, how are we going to handle this? That's usually not the
Yay.
conversation. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe on the other side of things a little bit.
Oh man, I could write a book on just things that I've done and things you should not do.
Yeah.
Ways that I've really messed up my kids. Um,
And we all swear we're not going. Isn't that amazing? I completely feel the same way. I put together, this is kind of an aside, but when my first child was born, I wrote out this sheet of paper. My wife and I each did about like almost like a letter to him, right? We only did it with him. I don't know why. We haven't done it with the other ones. And
well, he's the favorite, obviously.
Right. Yes. That's it. And for the life of me, I don't know where that sheet of paper is, but I know roughly what I wrote, and it was like a deep vow just to keep the world a magical place, right? For me, I was like, I that childlike wonderment, like to be able to keep that as alive as long as possible. I was like, I am going to work my butt off to make sure the world stays amazing for this child. And that was like, that was a deep core philosophy for us. But I feel like that, and then you get into it, right? And then everything
reality
is really, really real. And I'm like, oh, that was not a magical moment. I'm like that. Yeah.
Yeah. One that really sticks out is like, so we've always been very anatomical with my kids. And my dad was a chiropractor. My mom was a nurse prior to marrying my dad. So my parents were always very like specific. We have a penis, we have a vagina, we have an anus, we have, my mom was pregnant with my little brother when I was like 4. And we were in the bank, and the lady was like, this bank teller was like, oh, your mommy has a baby in her belly. And I was like, no, it's in her uterus. And and the lady was like, yeah, in her stomach. And I was like, she didn't eat it. Like, it's in her uterus.
That's funny.
And I'm 4 years old educating the bank teller. And I think sometimes like anatomical terms make people uncomfortable, but like, my parents were very specific in that. And I always appreciated that, because we didn't have like, I don't know, peepees or flowers, we had a vagina, and we had, and so for me, it was always very like uncomfortable when people use like, like, I don't know, like pet names or whatever for it, whatever. And it was always like,
it's not a bum bum.
Right, exactly. Like
it's a bum bum in our house, but yeah.
And so when I had kids, when my first son was born, we were like, we're going to be very conscious, like your leg does, I don't know, your leg doesn't hurt, your femur is, like, or your thigh is hurting, or your calf is, we want to be specific. And so we've sort of like snuck anatomy in there, which is probably why they have no desire to learn anything.
Yeah.
But then I started teaching at Life West, and I taught obstetrics and gynecology, and my job was to get in front of a bunch of, millennials and Gen Zers and talk about anatomical things that are uncomfortable for a lot of people. And so, for 7 years, I talked about, all things obstetrical and gynecological in front of people who really had no desire to learn anything. It's a general education class, so they all have to take it. So some people really loved it, and other people were like so mortified and embarrassed.
Yep.
So I thought, okay, this has really prepared me. So now my son is going to be 13 this year. Like, he's going to start asking questions. And I'm like, we have 2 boys. So my husband has to deal with a lot of that, because like boy anatomy confuses me a lot. Like, I don't get it. I've spent a lot of time in the female world. And so we're driving in the car one day, and I have both my kids in the car, and I'm like, okay, I am ready. If they ask me a question, we're going to be honest. I'm going to answer it. And just very like factually, I'm not going to like, birds and the bees and, when a man loves a woman, like, I'm just going to be very factual with it.
Yeah.
And we're driving in the car. This is the first conversation that is brought up. He says, Mom, what's 69? And I was like,
how old is he?
He was 12 at the time.
Right.
And I was like, where? And I was like, where did you hear that? And he was like, well, like, people just always like joke about it. Like, they'll say like 69, and I'm like, okay. And I was like, well, and then I like had this experience of being out of my body, looking down, and I'm just talking about like STDs and consent and how consent is important and STDs are rampant. And, and I like pretty soon I'm like talking about like all things venereal disease. And my 12-year-old is in the backseat of the car with his eyes like wide open. And he's like, I am never doing that. And like didn't even really explain it, just kind of explained like all the bad things that can happen. And then my younger son, who is like 6 at the time, goes, "Oh, I am definitely doing that." I was like, "Oh no, I've done something." So like later that day, my husband calls me and he's like, "So what happened?" And I was like, "Dude, you weren't there. You don't know. It went really weird, really fast." And he's like, "Yeah, because no one now is very concerned about all of these things." And I was like, "Yeah, I kind of messed up." And so me wanting to be so factual and like not put my stuff on it ended up just like blurting out all of these things that can go horribly wrong. And like and didn't even give him an answer as to what it was. And so yeah, we fight, my thing is like when people come in, they'll come in with like a newborn and they'll be like, the baby cried for 30 minutes on its own. And now I feel like I've, ruined it. And I'm like, oh, girl,
Yeah.
you have the rest of your life to mess this baby up. Don't even worry. And it's so interesting because we will all mess up our kids just in different ways than our parents messed us up. And
Yep.
in some ways the same. So
Yep.
like, I'm always like, my thing was like my parents were more my dad especially would get into like more of like an authoritative, like, you have to do this because I said so, because I'm the parent.
Mhm.
And I'd be like, I don't have to listen to you. And now like every once in a while I'll be like, I just need you to do it because I'm asking you to do it. And my son's like, well, that's not a good enough reason. I'm like, I know it's not a good enough reason, but it is a good enough reason because this is
Yeah.
my house and I pay the bills and you don't. So yeah,
Well,
we're now into a fully different level with the 13-year-old because
right.
he's now like kind of grasping more adult concepts.
Yeah, he's getting more of like that frontal cortex formation, rational and reasoning, although still not fully developed, are, in a better spot for,
Yeah.
for some folks it never fully gets developed, I'm sure. But
Well, and then in
yeah.
some cases, I know I'm in trouble because like, probably like 2 years ago, so he was like 11. We had talked about like eggs, how women make eggs. And one day we were making breakfast with eggs and he goes, Mama, is this your egg or is this a chicken egg? And I was like, yeah, our eggs aren't the same. Like, so then I'm like, man,
Yep,
try
looks
to be
just
so,
like it. Yeah, right.
so
Yeah.
clear in my language. I've now confused him so much.
Yeah. That's so interesting, right? With the best of intentions, like we're gonna have clarity around this subject and just creating more confusions.
So much more.
Maybe it just should have been a bum bum.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. I'm
yeah,
like, I don't know. I just
yeah. And I think that's so true, right? Whether we're pushing against our parents or unconsciously doing the same things they did, like either way, like there's some amount of the pattern is getting passed on from one generation to the next. And
yeah.
something that's been like a very recent realization for me just in the past, maybe like 6 or 8 months, is like the idea that my children probably have the same willpower that I have, if not more so, and so
Yeah.
to think that it's just going to be a battle of the will and then turn out the way that I want it to, I'm like, no, it's
Yeah.
something we realized from a very early age, which I constantly forget. But when my oldest, who's 9, and he's almost 10 years old now, when my oldest was about 2 to 3 is when a lot of like, the toddler behaviors start to emerge about like expressing his desire to say no or to, and then, and just complete defiance. He stopped responding to direct requests of like, let's go put our shoes on so we can go outside. Seems pretty straightforward, but nope, it was or okay, we need to get dressed now so we can go to the park, or, anything like that. Almost everything had to become a game and had to be like, and it requires so much mental energy as a parent And I forget that constantly, that especially with older kids, maybe it's a little different, but like when they're younger, the direct request almost never worked if it was going to stop them from doing something they were doing that they didn't want to stop doing, right? If it's like, it's like, well, I'm playing with my Legos and I don't want to go to the park, so I'm just not going to get dressed. It's like, but we need to go to the park. And the direct request never worked. So it had to be this like clever game or something funny, or you go and hide and you jump out at them and you throw clothes at them, whatever. It's like, had to, the direct request just stopped working, but I constantly forget that, it's one of those things of,
I know.
And then the willpower, right? Like obviously their willpower is just as strong as mine, that I made them, that's yeah.
Right. Well, and it's so funny because Matt and I are both very different people. Mm-hmm. Very different people. He is like way more like cool, calm, collected. It takes a lot to anger him, whereas I'm more like, like a little more spastic. And it's funny because our oldest son, I really thought we were good parents. Like I really did. I like he we've kind of always taken the approach that like his opinion matters, and like we want him to come up with ideas and theories and things on his own. Like I remember I went to a private Christian school and for high school, and when I turned 18, I was talking to one of my good friends about like, how do you know like what to vote for? Like, how do you know? Because it was our first election that we got to vote for. Yeah. And I was like, how do you know? Like, how do you know what you believe in? Like, how do you know? Like, I'm 18. I don't know anything, Of course, if my parents asked me, I knew everything. But I was like, having this conversation with my friend, and she was like, well, I just asked my parents. I just asked them, like, who should I vote for? And I was like, ugh, like they've ruined all of this. What are you talking about? And so for me, it was always like, I want my kids to come to their own conclusions based on the theory behind like being human, like being willing to connect with people regardless of whatever else there is. And so for Noah, we really like try to raise him like, we didn't tell him like, oh, you should believe this, or you shouldn't believe this, or this is good, or this is bad, but like general concepts. And then and now it's really funny because he's starting to get into the age of like asking really hard questions, and I'm still trying to apply those principles. But then he'll be like, okay, yeah, but what do you think? And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you what I think. What I think is irrelevant to what I want you to think, because I want you to think on your own, and I want you to have things, and I'll show you why people think differently. But it's a really different, it's interesting. And now, starting to have another baby, we'll have to go back to all the little kid stuff. And apply, similar concepts, but we're getting into like bigger, more serious concepts. Like he was recently asking me like what abortion was. He had heard somebody say abortion, and he was asking me if it was good or bad. And I was like, let's have this conversation, and I want you to come, and so, it's a very interesting time and really interesting to navigate, because I don't want to put my own stuff on him. I don't want to should on him as far as like what he should think or whatever. And so it's really interesting. But he's very much so, my older son is very much so like my husband. He's very like calm and like thinks things through very logically. And then my younger, so we were thinking like, man, we are really good parents. We've done such a good job. He's fair. He looks at things from different angles. This is awesome. And then my second son was born, and he's so much more like me, where he's just like, I don't like that person. And I'm like, why? And he's like, he looked at me funny. And I'm like, like, calm down. Like, it's okay. We live in a friendly universe, and it's just
not
so
that
funny.
Guy. You're
right, exactly. I'm like, oh my goodness. It's just so funny to see the differences, because the other thing, that like, I grew up in a family of 5 kids, and so my parents took it like, we have to be fair. We did one thing for one person,
Mhm.
one thing for another person. Like, we have to be fair. And with my kids, it's like, I'm looking at it going, they're phenomenally different people and their needs are so different that, yes, I want to be fair, but I want to be like reasonable as to their needs and their specific needs,
Yeah.
because each of them are so different.
Yeah, fairness and principle, but less literal, probably, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. No, you can take that to an extreme, be very literal about it, as
Yeah.
well. That's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's an interesting thing. In terms of brain development as well, right? Like thinking comes after feeling, and so
Right.
I'm wondering with your kids, did you encourage like your son? I don't like that person, and is he naturally more in touch with like his feelings in that way of like the person looked at him funny, so he felt funny with that person, and that's enough for him, right? Like he's
Yeah.
going to trust his
Yeah.
feelings, whereas your oldest might be a little more cerebral and wanting to like analyze or assess the situation a little bit more. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
My older son is definitely more, very much so more like, I don't want to say logical, but like,
yeah.
like if somebody looks at him funny, he's like, that's a them problem, that's not a me problem, like I did nothing wrong.
So
And
he
I'm
can
like,
he can separate himself from that. Then that's
yes.
yeah, yeah,
And my younger son is very much like, oh, but it feels this way, it feels that way, like,
yeah. That's
yeah,
interesting.
for sure, it's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating thing too, right? Like it's the differences between them. We
Yeah.
certainly see big personality differences between ours as well.
Yeah.
My oldest is they're both very empathic and empathetic kids. The
Yeah.
toddler, it's hard to tell at this point, really. he seems pretty happy most of the time. he's
Yeah.
he's 18 months old. He runs really fast and jumps and screams and yells and is happy. So he's a
Perfect.
um
You're doing great.
yeah, he's expressing his full toddlerness. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so busy. This is an aside, but yeah, we like tried to go out to dinner the other night, and he's just jumping all over the place. And it wasn't a super fancy restaurant, but it was like nice enough to where it would have been nice to be able to actually sit down and have some food. And he's just like sprinting around the restaurant, like shrieking, saying like outside, outside, like going outside, coming back
Yeah.
inside. And finally we were like, I don't think we're gonna go out to restaurants for a little while here until this settles down. But
Yep.
yeah, for our kids, we definitely noticed that, especially my oldest, though, he's very empathic, empathetic. His personality matches my wife's a little bit more, and like she's very empathic and empathetic in that way. I think I have some of that, but I think she and he could like walk into a room and probably like let you know the feel of the room, right? Like just like the way that they would feel things. And my daughter is more like me, my 6-year-old girl. She's more like the fireball, really like outgoing and spunky and energetic, and like she's our fire child, and
Yeah.
she's very emotional in that way as well. But I think it's less of like sensing emotions coming from other people and more like expressive with her emotions, like very like you're gonna know how she feels. She's not keeping anything inside. There's no tucking that away.
Yeah.
So I mean, I hope that, I think it will serve her well.
Yeah.
But this is kind of an aside, and since you homeschool your kids, you may notice that what we were noticing with our kids, we chose to they're in a homeschool co-op this year, full time. They were in public school the past 2 years. The year before that was, just everything was crazy because everything was closed down. So
Right.
that's kind of a wash, really. but what we noticed is that last year in school, my daughter used to like sing to herself and play and be creative, and like she would create these like really creative worlds in her head. And throughout the kindergarten year, it's almost like she stopped doing that.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is nobody was overtly telling her like, oh, you shouldn't do this, is what you're not supposed to do. Like everyone was very kind and supportive at the school, but the school day was so packed full and so tight of like agenda items. Even though they might have been fun, it's almost like she never had time for her mind to express creativity and to unwind and just to like sing and dance and be herself. And we've noticed, especially for both of them, like that side of creativity, now that they're at basically it's mainly outdoor homeschool co-op, that they're like the creativity has reemerged in a very powerful way.
Right.
And again, it wasn't overtly stifled, but I think the intonations of how you're supposed to behave in that environment, kids pick up on.
Right.
Or they rebel against it and they get labeled as behavior issues, right? So either one or the other. But I'm curious if you've noticed similar things with your own kids along your educational journey you've had with them.
Yeah. So we started our older son in a Montessori school. So he had been in Montessori up until March of 2020. And so I think he had gone through like fourth grade, like, halfway through fourth grade. And then COVID hit and they were like, you get an hour of Zoom, but tuition's the same. And we're like, no. So we pulled him out. And we live in beautiful California. So at this point, because we choose to not vaccinate our children, we also they're not allowed to go to school. So that we don't have a lot of choice in the matter. But I have, both Matt and I were homeschooled as young kids. I don't think that I did as well in homeschool as Matt did. I think I needed more of that like structure. And like even now, like if I'm doing something, if I'm having to do work, I have to like sit at a desk and like be still, and like I'm a really good student, like whereas Matt is a genius, but he is not a good student. He doesn't take notes in class. But he absorbs all of the information. And so with our son, like I always thought like homework was a total waste of time, especially in elementary school. It's not supported by research. So when he got into first grade for Montessori, they started doing homework. And by I think he was in second grade, and we told him like, look, we do not necessarily think homework is like the most supportive thing for you. If you want to do homework, you can do it. If you don't want to, we're not going to make you do homework at school or at home, because you've been at school for 9 hours and then coming home and doing like 2 hours of homework. We're not going to make you do that. And so we told him he didn't need to. And he was happy with that. He was doing great in school. He was fine. Like he didn't need the homework. So, so my sweet son, we're driving, I pick him up from school one day, and gets in the car, and, he's in second grade, and the teacher says to him, I hope that you get all your homework done tonight, because she really wanted him to get his homework done. And then she shuts the door, and he rolls the window down and looks at her and goes, not gonna happen. And I was like, oh my God. And so I just drive off. And I was like, Noah, you should not have said that to your teacher. Like, we can have like meaningful, nice conversations, but you're not just gonna look at her and be like, nope, lady, I'm not doing it. I was like, that was kind of rude. And so now it's become a joke in our family when something is not going to happen. We just not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
But it was one of those, like, I was really proud of him for just being like, I'm not doing it, lady. But also like, I needed him to do it respectfully.
There's a different way to go about it. Right. Yeah. No, that was a piece of it as well.
I mean, at this point we have them in a little cooperative homeschool thing where they get to be with other kids and stuff, which is great. But we've kind of always done it like, we've more so adapted like Montessori principles of like examining what they want to do and like subjects that they want to learn, and really trying to like, get them to learn. My older son really doesn't like English. He doesn't like reading necessarily. And so we'll give him, but he loves math. So we'll give him a lot of like word math questions. Well, he's having to read, he's having to write out things. And so really trying to adapt to like his strengths and, that kind of stuff. So we definitely, it's interesting because they're both very much so into math. And so my older son is in algebra now. He's in 8th grade. And my younger son is in like 1st grade trying to learn numbers. And he keeps asking for like negative numbers. He wants to do negative numbers. And I'm like, you're in 1st grade. You're not supposed to be doing that yet. Like, and so we're trying to like satisfy that for him, but also like get him to get general concepts first.
Well, and that's what's neat with the setup like you have. It can be child-led a little bit more and at their pace. And I think what was a important thing for us is like the co-op our kids are at, there's a lot of children there.
Yeah.
And so I think the impression of homeschoolers is like these like socially awkward recluses who are at home all day with their parents getting like brainwashed with different information, like that just doesn't seem to be what homeschooling is today by and large. It seems like it's become much more co-op based, very social, interactive, play-based. I mean, it can be however the family wants to structure it, really. But it does seem to be like it's become much more of a social setup, which is really neat. It's great for the kids also. I would love for it. We could keep chatting for hours. I feel like we could, this has been really fun. But I do have to jet in just a couple minutes here, but I just wanted to see, is there anything that you think is good in terms of, leaving with our listeners, or some underlying philosophies or things that you think are really important for people to know, or other ways folks can connect with you, anything like that?
I think the biggest thing that I tell like new parents is like it's kind of mean, but like the best parent you're ever going to be is before you have kids.
Yeah.
Right. Because you have all these ideas of how you should not do it. Probably you had people in the restaurant being like, I would never let my child run around like that, and it's like, yeah, okay. And then you have kids, and the reality of that is just, whatever. But then there's also like this idea that like, don't compare yourself. Teddy Roosevelt had a quote was the comparison is the theft of joy. And to me, it's like, don't go on Instagram. I tell new moms, don't go on Instagram and see these perfect babies with this perfect breast. Like, because that's all that's going to do is rob you of joy. And this is your baby. And nobody's ever studied you and your baby. Nobody knows you and your baby more than you do. And so don't expect perfection with parenthood. It's okay to say you don't know. It's okay to mess up. You don't come with a handbook. And so navigating what's going to work for you and try different things. But I think the reality of like getting off social media for the first little while and just trying not to compare yourself to other people, because it always, you can always find people who are doing it better than you. But it's like, I don't know, if I go to a new house, like I do a lot of house calls for new moms, and I'll say, what's one thing you did today that you can be proud of? And she's like, I can't think of anything. And I'm like, did you brush your teeth? And she's like, yeah. I'll be like, yes.
Big win.
You put your pants on, like that kind of thing. And it's like looking for small wins, because like it's a really hard job. I mean, I've gone through like pseudo medical school. Chiropractic college is very difficult. Parenthood is the hardest job I've ever done.
Nothing holds a torch to parenting.
No. And the stakes are really high, right? Like if you fail a class, you just take it again. But the stakes are really high with parenthood, because we're talking about somebody's life and their core values and how they view the world. And it's a big responsibility, but it's also like, it doesn't need to be so scary. It can be fun.
Yeah.
And I think people forget how fun, you get to help mold a child and be a core central character in their journey. And I think that that's really beautiful.
That is so beautiful. And it gets to be however you want it to be. That's a really neat thing. Yeah. Awesome. I really appreciate that, Jen. What are some ways that our listeners can connect more with you if they want to?
Well, they can find me on Instagram.
Speaking of Instagram, no, yeah,
exactly. They can find me on Instagram.
She's gonna post normal stuff, people. No,
don't look at stuff. Only look at my stuff. But they can find me on Instagram, Jen Santos DC. Awesome. Or email me drjen@acornchiropractic.com.
Awesome. Yeah. Beautiful. Thanks so much for taking the time, Jen. Really appreciate it. All right. Have a great one. Take care.